There comes a point in your walk where you must outgrow the language of desperation and step into the language of dominion. Many have spent years crying, pleading, and asking God to do what He has already done. They have lived beneath their privileges, unaware that heaven has already settled the matter. You see, victory is not something hanging in the future, waiting for your tears to bring it down. It has already been secured. The work is finished. The price has been paid. The authority has been handed over. Yet many still stand at the door of blessing, knocking, when they've already been given the key. This message is not for those who want to remain comfortable in religious routine. It is for those who are ready to rise, take their place, and walk in the authority that has already been given to them. Victory is not something you are trying to obtain. It is something that has already been secured on your behalf. And until that truth settles deep within your spirit, you will continue to struggle in areas where you were designed to reign. Many approach life as though they are in a constant battle, trying to win God's approval, trying to reach a place where breakthrough finally happens. But the reality is that the greatest victory has already been accomplished. And it was not accomplished by your effort, your striving, or your performance. It was accomplished once and for all, and what remains is not for you to recreate it, but to recognize it. When a person understands that victory is already theirs, their entire posture changes. They no longer speak like someone who is unsure, they no longer think like someone who is defeated, and they no longer respond to circumstances as though those circumstances have the final say. Instead, there is a quiet confidence that begins to rise within them, not because everything around them looks perfect, but because they know something greater than what they see. This is where many miss it, because they are moved by what they feel, by what they see, by what they hear, and as long as those things dictate their reality, they will live beneath the level of victory that has already been provided. But when revelation comes, when the light turns on inside, they begin to realize that they are not trying to get God to move on their behalf. They are standing in what has already been released. Their prayers shift from desperation to declaration. Their mindset shifts from lack to abundance. And their actions begin to align with someone who is not hoping for a change, but enforcing what is already true. This kind of understanding produces boldness, and that boldness is not arrogance. It is simply the result of knowing that the outcome has already been decided, that the authority has already been given, and that there is nothing left to earn, only something to walk in, something to lay hold of, something to exercise in everyday life as they begin to see themselves not as victims of circumstances, but as individuals who carry within them the reality of a finished work that cannot be undone, shaken, or reversed no matter what appears on the outside. There is a vast difference between approaching God as a beggar and approaching Him as one who has been given authority, and until that distinction becomes clear, many will remain stuck in cycles of unanswered prayers and frustration. Begging assumes distance. It assumes hesitation on God's part. It assumes that something must be persuaded, earned, or emotionally moved before anything can happen. But authority speaks from a completely different place. Authority understands relationship. It understands what has already been granted, and it operates with confidence rather than uncertainty. When someone begs, their words are filled with doubt, even if they sound sincere. They say things like, "If it be your will," in situations where the will has already been revealed, or they repeatedly ask for the same thing, as though heaven did not hear them the first time. This kind of approach keeps a person in a position of weakness, always looking up, always waiting, always unsure, never stepping into the place where they were designed to stand. But when a person begins to understand authority, something shifts deep within them. They realize that they are not trying to convince God to act. They are cooperating with what God has already established. Their language changes, their tone changes, their expectation changes. They no longer come with empty hands hoping for something to be placed in them. They come knowing that something has already been deposited within them, and now it is their responsibility to exercise it. Authority does not cry out in fear, It speaks with certainty. It does not shrink back in the face of opposition. It rises and declares what is true regardless of what is seen. This is where many feel uncomfortable at first, because it requires them to step out of the familiar pattern of pleading and into the unfamiliar territory of commanding. But that is exactly where transformation begins. Operating in authority does not mean disrespect, it does not mean pride, and it does not mean independence from God. It means alignment with Him to such a degree that you speak as one who knows what has already been decided. It means you stop asking for healing as though it is uncertain, and you begin to declare it as something that belongs to you. It means you stop begging for peace as though it is far away, and you begin to enforce it in your mind and in your environment. It means you stop pleading for provision as though it is scarce, and you begin to speak from the reality that supply has already been made available. This kind of shift separates those who live in constant struggle from those who walk in consistent victory, because one is always trying to receive, while the other has learned how to enforce what has already been given and to stand firm in that place regardless of what pressure may come against them. The power of the spoken word is one of the most misunderstood and yet most powerful forces in the life of a believer, because words are not merely sounds that pass through the air. They are carriers of authority, containers of faith, and instruments through which unseen realities are established in the visible realm. Many speak casually, without awareness, allowing doubt, fear, and uncertainty to flow freely from their lips, not realizing that they are reinforcing the very situations they desire to change. They pray one moment and then contradict their prayers the next, declaring defeat, speaking lack, agreeing with circumstances, and in doing so, they weaken the force of what they claim to believe. Words were never designed to be empty. They were designed to align with truth and to enforce what has already been settled. When a person begins to understand this, they become intentional with what they say. They recognize that their voice is not just for expression, but for establishment. Instead of speaking based on how things look, they begin to speak based on what they know has already been made available. This requires discipline, because the natural tendency is to echo what is seen and felt, but authority speaks beyond appearances. Authority declares healing when symptoms are present, speaks provision when resources seem limited, and declares peace in the middle of chaos. It is not denial of reality. It is a higher acknowledgement of truth that overrides what is temporary. There is a creative force released when words are spoken in alignment with faith, and this is why consistency matters. It is not enough to declare something once and then spend the rest of the day speaking the opposite. What you continually say shapes what you continually experience, because words reinforce belief, and belief directs action. When your words align with what has already been established, they begin to carry weight, and that weight begins to push against opposing circumstances. Over time, what was once unseen begins to manifest, not because something new was created, but because something already settled was enforced through consistent declaration. This is where many lose ground, not because they lack faith, but because they lack consistency in their speech. They allow pressure to dictate their confession, and in moments of difficulty, they revert back to speaking what they feel instead of what they know. But when a person becomes steadfast, when they refuse to let go of the words that align with truth, when they continue to declare regardless of delay or resistance, something begins to shift. Their inner world becomes established first, and from that place, the outer world begins to respond. Their words become a steady force, not driven by emotion, but anchored in conviction. And through that unwavering alignment, they begin to see the reality of what they have been declaring take form in their life, as they consistently release words that carry authority, faith, and the power to enforce what has already been accomplished beyond the limitations of what is seen or felt. Understanding your identity is the foundation upon which everything else stands, because if you do not know who you are, you will never fully step into what belongs to you, and you will constantly live beneath a level that was never intended for you. Many struggle not because provision is lacking, not because power is unavailable, but because their perception of themselves is distorted. They see themselves as weak when they have been made strong, as unworthy when they have been accepted, as distant when they have been brought near, and that internal image shapes how they think, how they speak, and how they respond to every situation that comes before them. Identity is not something you create through effort. It is something you discover and then align with, and until that alignment happens, there will always be a gap between what has been given and what is being experienced. When a person begins to see themselves differently, everything begins to shift from the inside out. They no longer approach life trying to become something they already are. They begin to operate from the place of already being. This changes the way they pray, the way they speak, and the way they carry themselves. Instead of shrinking back in uncertainty, there is a quiet assurance that rises within them, not based on feelings or circumstances, but based on an inner knowing that they belong in a place of authority. This is where confidence is born, not from external validation, but from internal revelation. It is not loud or boastful. It is steady and unshaken, because it is rooted in something that does not change. Without this understanding, a person will continue to live reactively, always responding to what happens around them, always adjusting based on pressure, always trying to regain control when things seem to slip out of their hands. But when identity is established, they become proactive rather than reactive. They no longer wait for circumstances to dictate their position. They define their position first and then address circumstances from that place. They do not see themselves as victims of what is happening, but as individuals who carry something greater within them that has the ability to influence and change what is happening. This is where many hesitate, because stepping into identity requires letting go of old patterns of thinking. It requires releasing the mindset of limitation, of inadequacy, of constant striving, and embracing a mindset that says you have already been positioned, already been equipped, already been given what is necessary to stand firm. It means you stop questioning whether you are worthy to walk in authority and begin to act as someone who has already been authorized. It means you stop identifying with past failures and begin to identify with present reality. This shift does not happen automatically. It requires continual renewal of the mind, continual alignment with truth, and a refusal to go back to the old way of seeing yourself. As this understanding deepens, a person begins to carry themselves differently in every area of life. Their words reflect who they believe they are. Their decisions reflect what they know belongs to them, and their actions begin to mirror the authority that has been placed within them. They no longer wait for permission from circumstances or approval from others, because they have already settled within themselves who they are and where they stand, and from that place they begin to move forward with a sense of purpose, clarity, and confidence that is not shaken by external pressures, but is continually reinforced by the revelation of identity that governs how they think, speak, and live each day. Faith was never designed to sit still, to hesitate, or to wait for perfect conditions before it moves. True faith is active by nature, and the moment it is genuinely present, it produces action. Many misunderstand this and treat faith as something passive, something that exists only in words or in quiet belief without any outward expression. But faith that does not act remains incomplete. It is not enough to say you believe. Belief must translate into movement, into decisions, into a response that reflects what you claim to know. Waiting for everything to line up before you act is not faith. It is dependence on circumstances, and as long as circumstances are your signal to move, you will always be delayed. Faith operates from a place of certainty, even when there is no visible evidence. It does not wait for confirmation from the outside. It is already convinced on the inside. Because of this, it steps forward when others hesitate, it speaks when others remain silent, and it holds its ground when others retreat. This kind of faith is not reckless. It is anchored in something unseen but unshakable. It understands that what has been established does not need to be proven before it is acted upon, and so it moves in alignment with that understanding. This is where many struggle. because acting without visible proof challenges the natural way of thinking, which depends on what can be seen, measured, or felt. When faith truly takes hold, it refuses to be delayed by doubt, fear, or uncertainty. It does not wait for emotions to catch up, and it does not consult every possible outcome before taking a step. Instead, it responds immediately to what it knows to be true. This immediacy is what sets it apart, because hesitation often opens the door for doubt to grow. The longer a person delays, the more they begin to question, analyze, and second guess, and eventually they talk themselves out of what they initially believed. But when faith acts quickly, it bypasses that cycle and establishes a momentum that becomes difficult to stop. Action is the evidence of faith. It shows up in the way a person speaks, in the decisions they make, and in the steps they take even when the outcome is not yet visible. It is seen when someone declares peace in the middle of pressure and then refuses to be moved by anxiety. It is seen when someone speaks provision and then continues to move forward without shrinking back in fear of lack. It is seen when someone declares healing and then lives as though that reality is already in motion, rather than constantly checking for signs of change. These actions may seem small at first, but they carry weight because they are rooted in conviction rather than reaction. Over time, consistent action builds strength. The more a person responds in faith, the more natural it becomes. What once required effort begins to flow more freely, and what once felt uncertain becomes settled. This does not mean challenges disappear, but it does mean that challenges no longer dictate behavior. Instead of being pushed back by opposition, a person continues to move forward with steady confidence, not because everything is easy, but because they have learned to act regardless of what stands in front of them. Faith does not wait for the right moment. It creates movement in the present moment, responding to what is already known and stepping forward with a resolve that refuses to be delayed by what is seen, felt, or feared. Circumstances were never designed to have dominion over you, yet many have unknowingly given them that place by constantly reacting to what they see instead of responding from what they know. When situations arise, whether it is lack, pressure, conflict, or uncertainty, the natural tendency is to step back, observe the intensity of what is happening, and then allow that to dictate emotions, decisions, and even words. But the moment circumstances begin to control your response, they begin to control your direction, and over time, they shape the outcome of your life. Dominion means something entirely different. It means you do not deny the existence of circumstances, but you refuse to let them define your position. When a person begins to understand dominion, they no longer approach situations as though they are powerless or at the mercy of what is unfolding. Instead, they stand firm with the awareness that what is within them carries more weight than what is around them. This does not mean that pressure disappears immediately, and it does not mean that challenges will not present themselves, but it does mean that those challenges no longer hold authority. Authority shifts from the outside to the inside, and once that shift takes place, everything else begins to fall into a different order. Many people speak in agreement with their circumstances without realizing it. They describe their situation repeatedly, they magnify the problem, and in doing so, they reinforce its presence. The more attention and agreement a circumstance receives, the more influence it appears to have. But when a person steps into dominion, they begin to speak differently. They do not echo what is wrong. They establish what is right. They do not allow temporary conditions to become permanent declarations. Instead, they respond with clarity, with confidence, and with an understanding that what they declare carries the ability to challenge and change what is currently visible. Dominion also requires steadiness. It is not something that is exercised once and then abandoned when resistance appears. There will be moments when circumstances seem to intensify, moments when it feels as though nothing is changing, and moments when the pressure tries to force a reaction. In those moments, the temptation is to retreat, to give in, or to accept things as they are, but true dominion holds its ground. It refuses to bow, it refuses to shift its position, and it refuses to surrender to what is temporary. This persistence is not driven by stubbornness, but by conviction. It is the result of knowing that what has been established is greater than what is being experienced. As this understanding grows, a person begins to live differently. They no longer measure their situation based on what they see in the moment, but based on what they know has already been set in place. Their emotions come under control, their reactions become intentional, and their words begin to carry a different tone. Instead of being overwhelmed by what surrounds them, they begin to influence what surrounds them. Instead of being shaped by pressure, they begin to apply pressure through consistent alignment with truth. Circumstances that once seemed immovable begin to lose their grip, not because they disappear instantly, but because they are no longer being fed with agreement and fear. And in that shift, a new level of stability, authority, and control begins to emerge as they continue to stand in a place where they are no longer under the weight of what is happening, but are positioned above it, exercising dominion with a steady resolve that refuses to be shaken by what appears in front of them. Alignment with God's will is the foundation that gives authority its legitimacy, because true authority does not originate from personal desire, emotion, or human effort, but from standing in agreement with what has already been established. Many attempt to enforce outcomes without first ensuring that what they are standing on is rooted in truth, and this is where confusion and frustration often begin. Authority without alignment becomes striving, it becomes repetition without power, it becomes words without substance. But when a person is aligned, there is a certainty that undergirds everything they say and do, a confidence that does not come from within themselves, but from knowing they are standing on something that cannot fail. This alignment requires understanding, and understanding requires intentional pursuit. It is not automatic, and it is not based on assumptions or feelings. A person must come to know what has already been declared, what has already been promised, and what has already been made available. Without this knowledge, they may speak words, but those words will lack direction. They may desire results, but their approach will lack clarity. But when alignment is present, there is no guessing. There is no uncertainty about whether something is possible or permissible, because the foundation has already been settled. When someone is aligned, their words begin to carry a different kind of weight. They are no longer speaking out of hope alone, but out of agreement. Their declarations are not attempts to create something new, but expressions of what already exists. This removes hesitation, because they are not questioning whether something will happen. They are simply enforcing what has already been established. This is where authority becomes effective, because it is backed by truth rather than driven by desire. Alignment also produces consistency. When a person knows what they stand on, they are not easily moved by changing circumstances or fluctuating emotions. They do not shift their position based on what they feel in a given moment, and they do not alter their words based on what they see around them. Instead, they remain steady, continuing to speak and act in agreement regardless of external pressure. This consistency strengthens their stance because it prevents contradiction and reinforces the reality they are aligned with. There is also a level of responsibility that comes with alignment. It requires a willingness to let go of personal opinions, to release preconceived ideas, and to submit to what has already been declared, even when it challenges natural thinking. It means choosing truth over feeling, choosing certainty over doubt, and choosing alignment over convenience. This is not always comfortable because it calls for discipline and intentionality, but it is necessary for authority to function as it was designed. As alignment deepens, a person begins to experience a greater level of clarity and direction. Their actions become more precise, their words become more focused, and their responses become more intentional. They are no longer scattered or uncertain because they are anchored in something unchanging. From that place, they are able to stand firm, to speak with confidence, and to act with assurance, knowing that what they are enforcing is not based on temporary desire, but on an established reality that has already been set in place, giving their authority a foundation that remains steady regardless of what challenges may arise or what circumstances attempt to suggest otherwise. In conclusion, the life of a believer is not meant to be spent continually pleading for what has already been secured. Victory is not a future event, it is a present reality. Everything has already been accomplished, and your role is no longer to ask but to enforce. When you understand your identity, walk in authority, speak words aligned with truth, act in faith, exercise dominion over circumstances, and remain aligned with God's will, you step into a realm where victory is not hoped for, it is declared, it is enforced, and it is manifested. The difference between living beneath your privileges and walking in them is simply this: those who pray for victory remain dependent on circumstances, while those who enforce it operate from the place of authority that has already been given. Your words, your actions, your faith, and your understanding of who you are all work together to bring what heaven has ordained into the earth. Now is the time to rise above hesitation, to refuse the language of doubt, and to step boldly into your God-given authority. The victory is yours, not because you earn it, not because you strive for it, but because it has already been secured. Your responsibility is to take your place, enforce it, and walk daily in the reality that has been established, refusing to let anything or anyone challenge the position that has been divinely granted to you.